I think we spend far too much time in many marketing organizations trying to research everything to be really sure, right, about what's going to happen when you put it into the market. You can never be sure.
Right. Then you have analysis paralysis as well.
Yeah, analysis paralysis, and you just end up spending all this time in an artificial environment trying to predict what's going to happen in the real world. Just do something in the real world and get that instant feedback.
This is Next Gen Builders, the show for the growth and product leaders of tomorrow. What does it take to transform a brand with a long history and shift the way people think and feel about your business? Well, today we're going to dive deep into how to rebuild your brand from the inside out and why gut instincts and bold storytelling beat all the generic playbooks, and how you can get your ideas from your brain to go through the creative process and get them out into the market to drive impact. Joining us today to talk through brand transformation is Brent Smart, the Chief Marketing Officer at Australian Telco, Telstra. Welcome, Brent.
I feel like I should say g'day.
G'day. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Francois, for having me on. It's great to be talking to you.
It's great for you to be here. And we're really excited for you to be on the podcast. I think maybe first, I know you love brand and you talk a lot about brand, but when you joined Telstra, you've gone through this whole brand transformation. What does that look like when you joined? How do you actually transform a brand? How do you quantify the success of that brand transformation? And where are you guys at now in that journey? A lot of questions packed into one.
No, a lot of questions. So when I joined, I think Telstra is one of the most iconic brands in Australia. We certainly don't have an awareness problem. We've got like 100% awareness, and everyone knows us. We're a real sort of part of the fabric of this nation. But I think Telstra had, and quite surprising to me, Telstra was a very aggressive trading company, right? We call it trading, which is sort of all our retail activity and our performance marketing and our channels. And I sort of expected Telstra being the market leader, a company with a lot of legacy. I probably expected coming in that maybe Telstra wouldn't be as aggressive as some of the challenger brands and smaller brands in the market, but it was really aggressive on the trading, weekly trading meetings. Everyone knows the numbers and really good at it, like a really well-developed trading muscle. But because it was so focused on that, the brand muscle was a little bit lacking development, like it needed to get in the gym and we need to build the brand muscle back up. And in fact, probably the sort of the starkest example of that was 80% of our marketing budget was getting spent on that short-term trading activity and only 20% on the brand. So job number one was to get people to understand the value, the commercial value that brand can bring beyond just the quarter we're in, right? That's the beautiful thing about a brand is when you build brand, you're not just talking to the smaller group of customers who are in market right now. You're talking to everyone. And we've got some incredible technologies available to us today as marketers. It's never been more possible to target someone and to really sort of understand if someone is, in market and ready to buy. Like, we've got amazing tools to do that. But there's only one killer technology that lets you reach someone who has no interest whatsoever in your category. They're not interested in buying a mobile phone. They don't know when they're going to buy a mobile phone. They might buy it next month. They might buy it next year. They don't know. They're just not engaged in the category. They're just not interested. They're just going about their daily lives. And there's only one killer technology that can actually engage that type of customer, implant a memory into their brain and make them feel better about your brand, and that's called brand advertising. I don't know anything else that can do it. So that's the power of brand. Brand builds future demand with people who aren't in the market yet. They're going to be in the market someday, and that future demand isn't going to help you this quarter, but it's going to help you in 3 quarters or further out. And I think being able to explain how that works is a big part of the job, right? And so that was the first thing, like really getting people to understand that we need to build the brand in the long term and the commercial benefits that would deliver. So that was step
How
one.
do you assess where the brand is, like current state? Do you use market studies for that, or is it a feeling?
well, no. Well, we've got all the data in the world, right? We've got so much data on awareness, consideration, brand image attributes, all this. We're drowning in data. But I always think that the data doesn't really give you a feeling for the brand. It doesn't for me anyway. So we did an ethnographic study where, rather than talking to lots of customers, we spoke to a small group of customers, spent a lot of time with them. We spent about sort of 3 days with them, and we hung out with them in their homes, in the pub, at their local sporting clubs, and we just spent time in their environment talking to them about the brand. And the really most powerful thing was we asked them to draw the Telstra brand. And they did these drawings, and I brought those drawings back into our business, and it's so much more powerful. The old adage, picture tells 1,000 words,
Yeah.
but you have an emotional reaction to a drawing that you don't get from data sets, and so for me, that was a really powerful way of really sort of understanding how customers really, when you get under the surface, how customers are really feeling about the brand, and that became, the good old from to shift. That became sort of the from, like what we wanted to shift from was the way that people were currently perceiving the brand. And by the way, those drawings were,
Yeah, I need to know. So you go in, they're drawing stick figures of how they imagine Telstra to be. Like, what did they come up with?
Yeah, so what they drew mainly, there were 3 sort of major themes of what they drew: a white guy in a suit. We got lots and lots of white guys in a suit, right? So you're sort of, you're traditional, you're serious, you're boring, you're corporate. We got Monopoly Man, from the board game. And we got bags of cash and cash registers and all this sort of imagery to suggest you care more about profit than you do customers. And then the other one, which was probably the one that gave everyone the most visceral kind of reaction, was 2 stick figures. A large stick figure and a smaller stick figure. And the large stick figure is sort of bending over and pointing his finger down at the little stick figure, and it just said bully, right? So you're talking down to us. You're the big guy in the market that sort of, is bullying customers. So it wasn't great. We knew we had some reputational challenges. Our category makes it hard. Telcos don't have the greatest reputations,
Sure.
as a category. So that makes it hard that you start from a disadvantage being a telco. And we knew we had some reputational challenges, but those images, those drawings were able to sort of, funnily enough, articulate it better than any words or data could.
It's hard to get feedback like that about whatever you're working on. In this case, the brand, but it could be, your product. You get product feedback. You get feedback at a retro, and now you're being told, okay, your baby's ugly or has room for improvement.
Yeah.
How do you go from that to a desired state?
Well, I mean, like I said earlier, it gives you the from, right? Like you go, okay, so this is what people really think about us. So here's the vision of what we, could be. And I think, personality is massive for brands. And I think you often end up with these really sort of wishy-washy words. We want to be confident and optimistic and likable. I mean, who doesn't? I mean, and so trying to get to a much more specific tone of voice and personality for a brand, I think is super, super important, and being really clear on that, and then that becoming a filter for everything you do, right? Like is this really consistent with the type of voice we're trying to be? I think it's so important for a brand to have a voice, a clear voice, because we live in a world where there's just too much stuff. There's too much content. There's too many digital experiences. There's too many products. There's just too much stuff. So being distinctive and having a clear voice that's like no one else's has never been more important. And that's why we see brands like Liquid Death, have such incredible meteoric growth, because it's got such a distinct voice. It's like nothing else, not just nothing else in the water category. It's like nothing else in
It's
the beverage
amazing
category.
for water. And unreal.
Yeah, and so that's a brand that knows its voice, right? And I think Apple, is the most valuable brand in the world, and I don't need to wait for the Apple logo to know it's an Apple ad. Apple has such a clear voice and has for such a long time. So I think that idea of like what's our brand voice is really important. And I think the other really important thing is a lot of that stuff can live in a PowerPoint document. It's all these sort of words about the type of brand we want to be. In the end, you got to make work and put that work out to the market that really personifies that voice and brings that voice to life. That's how you build a brand. You don't build it in PowerPoint decks that sit inside an organization. You've got to make stuff that really starts to shift the personality and really starts to feel different. My favorite sort of soundbite on brands is if you want to change how people feel about a brand, you've got to change how the brand feels. So we worked really hard to change how the Telstra. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and so we worked really hard to change how the brand feels at Telstra, and we wanted to feel very different to any other telco. But not just that, I wanted to feel different to any other big brand in Australia. I wanted to really have a very sort of distinct, creative, interesting voice. So that's what we've sort of set about doing over the last little while. And what's interesting, if you put the brand, what we're doing now, you put that creative work next to what we were doing, like it's completely different, and it feels so different to how it felt before. And I really hope that I'm going to get some people to do some drawings soon. Like once the brand's had a bit of a chance to, really be established. I just hope we get 3 very different drawings. When they do.
Absolutely. And so when you think about brand versus like trading or doing lead gen, all of that. It is a long-term bet, right? It's not something you measure in days or quarters. It's probably years.
Yeah.
How do you keep the organization engaged and motivated because you don't get that instant results, right? That dopamine hit when you see, those leads coming through. Is there a technique that you have to like get things going long-term?
I always say you need equal parts conviction and patience, right? So at the start, you need a lot of conviction because you don't have the data at the start, right? You've got no data to show that if we do this move towards brand, it's going to help the leads and it's going to help the sales and it's going to help the retail traffic and all those important metrics that get measured week to week. So at the start, you've just got conviction, and you need a lot of conviction, right? Because all those sales people are measured on those weekly metrics and they don't want to see them drop because their bonus will drop, like they're very motivated for those things not to move. So what we did early on was a test market, and I'm a massive believer in get out of research and go and do something live in the market and see what happens, right? So we just took Adelaide, one of the smaller capital cities here in Australia, and we went from 80-20, which was, as I said earlier, was our sort of split between trading brand. We went 50-50, and we left it for 6 months to see what would happen. And I was sort of, crossing my fingers that, oh my God, let's hope that the retail metrics don't drop. And the opposite happened when we compared Adelaide to the national numbers. Adelaide was up, 14% up on all the key short-term metrics. So suddenly now I've got some data to go with the conviction. And I can say, look what happened when we tried in Adelaide, guys. Like it actually increased sales. So that's the first thing I say to anyone. Just test it somewhere. Just test it and see if you can prove that it has an impact. But you can't test it for 2 weeks or 4 weeks. We tested it for 6 months. You got to give it time to work. And that's the patience bit. You got to have patience with brand metrics. They don't move quickly. They move slowly. Right. But what happens, which is brilliant, is over time, as brand starts to work, that future demand starts to build, and people start entering the market, right, who are more predisposed to brand, you start getting this amazing cumulative benefit. And after 2 years, it looks great. And suddenly, all your performance metrics go up as well. And that's been proven, there's a great study just come out by the guys at Walk around brand is a multiplier for performance marketing. When the brand is strong, the performance marketing actually works better. And so we've seen that. As we've built brand over time, we've seen our short-term ROIs actually go up, not go down. And that's the power of the brand. It's because the brand doesn't just help with this quarter's numbers, it helps with next quarters and beyond. And once you give it time to start building, you can start showing that not just the brand metrics are healthy, right? Also our short-term performance metrics are healthy. Like you can start showing the brand impact, but you need time. It's not going to show in the first quarter. It's not going to show in the first quarter.
Right.
You got to wait.
Well, and I like that you're using experimentation as a way of learning, right?
Yeah.
Because it is, I think, one of the techniques that, you don't always know, but you build conviction through testing, learning, and maybe the experiment failed. And that's okay, as long as you're
Totally.
learning and
Because you learned something. You learned something, and I'm equally passionate about not pre-testing, because I think pre-testing is very artificial, and it's not how people actually respond to advertising in the real world. So I'm like, don't stop researching stuff. Just put it into market and get a real response, and as you say, and get some real learnings. I think we spend far too much time, in many marketing organizations trying to research everything to be really sure, right, about what's going to happen when you put it into the market. You can never be sure.
Right. Then you have analysis paralysis as well.
Analysis paralysis, and you just end up spending all this time in an artificial environment trying to predict what's going to happen in the real world. Just do something in the real world and get that instant feedback. And I think it's a really powerful thing. And we've tested all sorts of things. And the other thing too is you've got to be prepared to turn things off as well. So that's how you really learn if things work. You've got to turn it off, see what happens. And quickly if it's really driving some incremental some incremental results. Because that's the thing, when you've got everything turned up to 10, it's really hard to work out what's driving the results. So you've got to be prepared to, turn it off in some places, double it in other places, do something here that you're not doing there, and compare. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect science if you do it like that. But it gives you, I think, some really good reads on what happens when real people connect with real work in the real world versus this artificial world called research.
I love it. And I like to turn it up to 11 because it's one better than 10. It's got to be better.
Why not? One
of the things I really appreciate about you is that you're not just, an executive leading a large team. You actually like to be in the work and doing the work. Tell me, how do you spend your time between creating and being not the IC marketer, but in the team versus leading the team? And how does that look like every day?
Yeah, it's a hard balance, I've got to say. But by the same token, I do believe that I need to be in the work, and I am in the work. So the way I do it is I spend Tuesdays with the agency. It's a pretty simple thing. Just I block out my calendar for 9 to 3 every Tuesday, and I'm at the agency, and I'm looking at the work. I'm helping to develop the work, and it does a couple of things. It says to everyone, this is important, right? But it also takes out a whole bunch of inefficiency of we've got to edit. We need to show Brent, and is he available Wednesday at 8 o'clock or Thursday at 11? No, I'm available Tuesday 9 to 3, and if you're not ready this Tuesday, be ready next Tuesday. It's fine. And it creates a cadence. So it creates a cadence where everyone is working towards, let's be ready on Tuesday. And it's good to have that, I think, cadence and discipline to sort of how you work. And look, I copied this is what Apple does. Apple meets with the agency every Tuesday and have since Steve Jobs was at Apple. There's discipline to it. We do it every Tuesday. So that's one way that helps me sort of, manage my diary and be really available. But the other thing, look, it gives me energy. It just gives me energy to be around ideas and having conversations about ideas as opposed to being a risk and compliance meeting or a financial results meeting. I'm in those meetings and they're really important, but they don't give me the same energy as a creative meeting does, So for me, it gives me energy, which is really important, I think, if you love what you do,
I totally agree. And so that Tuesday meeting creates predictability.
Yep.
I think the way you're describing it, it also reduces bureaucracy because the people that are there to make decisions can make it there.
Yep.
And it also shows importance, right? Because you're spending the time, therefore it's important to you and the team.
Yeah, totally. And the other thing we do, which I learned from, 20 years in agencies, we talk about, is this a taxi meeting or a bus meeting?
do you mean by that?
So a taxi meeting means you're only allowed to have, from Telstra, you're only allowed to have the number of people you can fit in a taxi, no more. So you can't turn up with the 15 people and all the cross-functional team. So everyone, because when an idea is first presented for the very first time, they're never born, ready. They're very fragile things, and the last thing you want is a whole room of clients all weighing in with their feedback and dissecting the work and overthinking the work, and it just becomes a pile on. And that's the quickest way to kill an idea. You want a small group of people, you want a lot of trust in the room, and you want to have a conversation that builds on the idea, not sucks all the energy out of the idea. So that's a taxi meeting. First time things are presented, we have a taxi meeting, and then we have the bus meeting. Once we've got an idea and we sort of decide, right, this is the thing that we're going to all get behind, then we bring the bus in and we get everyone across the work early, get everyone upstream on it, so that we don't have that horrible thing where we finish the campaign and then we work out what the digital guys need for the digital channel. No, we get everyone in there up front and make sure we're really clear on what everyone needs to execute it, with true integration across every channel. So yeah, taxi or bus is how we think about creative meetings, and it's a really, I think, important thing, because this when the army of clients turn up to a creative meeting, that is not conducive to creativity.
Now, what does that look like when somebody comes in and pitches you an idea? I mean, you're a CMO, you're the person they aspire to be, or a high-level person. What does a great pitch meeting look like to you? What do you expect to see? What is a good example where if they do this, it's going to go off the rails, and is it going to be a bad pitch?
I'll start there because it's easier. It's easy to talk about what not to do, I think. I mean, don't walk in with 100 slides or 20 slides. I just think like less is more. Don't kill me with a deck. It's so frustrating, right? Because the human nature is, I want to see the thing, and like all this build up and all this rationale, and two things happen when you do that, right? I get frustrated, but B, you're engaging the rational brain, and what we got to do when we see ideas is we got to actually quieten down the rational brain, and we got to approach it in a way that we have more of an emotional and intuitive reaction, and we got to approach it how a consumer would. The consumer doesn't get the 10 slides beforehand that tells them what the idea is and the strategy and why it's right? They just see it. So I think that's the first thing. Like, don't over-explain it. It's not about how diligent you've been and how thorough you've been. That doesn't matter. So that's the first thing. Make it short. I think the second thing is, don't read a script. It's the worst thing creatives do when they read a script. It's tell me the idea and let me feel the idea, and let's talk about the idea, and then we'll talk about the execution and where it's shot and how it's shot. We'll get to all that stuff. But tell me the idea. What's the core idea, and tell me why you love it. Let me feel your passion for the idea, not we open on and we go through the script like that. We'll get to that stuff. And I think that's a big thing that I think the great creatives understand the difference between an idea and execution. Mm-hmm. And the great creatives are prepared to let go of executional things and understand there's many ways to execute things. They don't fall in love with an execution. They fall in love with an idea. And I do too. I fall in love with an idea. And then I think we have a really interesting conversation about, okay, there are many ways we could execute this. Let's explore that a little bit. And I think separating the idea from the execution, and I think it is something that is a dying art. I think that now we get very caught up with the execution, the platform it's going to live in, the clever bit of technology we're bringing to it. It's all executional stuff. But what's the idea? And I think a lot of people struggle to actually articulate what the core idea is. And we've got to get better. I mean, Hollywood's amazing at it. Hollywood can pitch you a movie in like 30 words, right? And yet marketers, can't. They need to explain all this sort of stuff and get into all the sort of detail of stuff. And I think also as a CMO, when you then are pitching things internally to the C-suite, they don't want all the details about the marketing execution. They want to know, how does it link to our strategy? How's it going to solve our business problems? And tell me the core idea and why it's right, and get out. Whereas I think, again, we want to give them all the detail and show them all the work we've done. I think marketers, we get too caught up in all the marketing lingo and jargon and, nonsense. And I think we just got to instead be really sort of clear on this is the idea, and this is why we think it's right. And again, bring the conviction that it's right. That's the main thing when you're pitching anything is conviction. Like I want to see that you believe in it. That's really infectious. Whereas you can sniff straight away if someone doesn't really believe in it.
Right.
Like straight away. Yeah, and so I think conviction's everything when you're trying to pitch whatever you're pitching, right?
But in order to have conviction in the idea, you probably have done your homework, aka you probably looked at some data, you've done some market research, you have built your hypothesis grounded on something.
Of course.
I guess how do you balance out that
Well,
you want to show the work,
yeah.
or do you just trust that the work happened and that's how you build conviction?
Well,
I've seen different perspectives from folks.
I think for me the time to do all that is at the brief,
Okay.
right? So like when we're doing the brief, that's the time to make sure that we've got all the data. We're really clear on who we're targeting and why we're targeting them, and we're really clear on like what are we trying to achieve with this, what business problem we're trying to solve, or what opportunity we're trying to unlock. So I would say the brief is when you do all that, not the idea. And by the time you've got the idea, like why would you go in and try and sort of sell that idea based on all the brief and pre stuff and like you should have people on that journey with you anyway. This is what we're working on and why, and but I just think make it simple, tell a story, like use some storytelling, and have the confidence to be able to here's my point of view on this idea, as opposed to here are a bunch of slides that someone else has written for me that tells me why this is a very rational, logical thing to do. Like you should have a point of view on why you think it's right. Why is it great? Why are you dying to make this thing? And I think when you've got that kind of conviction, I think it's really hard to say no to people with that kind of conviction.
Yeah,
It's really
I agree
easy.
with that.
It's really easy to say no to someone who's got lots and lots of data, because then you can use data to fight the data. You know what I mean? So,
Well, and it's something that applies to everything. Every time you're pitching an idea, whether it's a strategy, a new project, whatever, at what point do you spend weeks putting everything together, the brief, the PRD, whatever, the narrative, but there's a process before that I think helps develop and build the idea.
yeah, totally. And you it's that old agency expression, shit in, shit out, right? Like so you got to make sure that the strategy and the brief and the plan and like we got to, another soundbite I love is that the discipline liberates creativity. So by doing all that work, right, really disciplined work, it actually lets us have much more confidence that the idea is right. Because we really know the opportunity we're going after. We really know the space in the market, whatever it is. And so I think the pre-work is super important. And creativity, I think a tight brief leads to better ideas and some sort of open, do whatever you want. Like an open brief, I think is not going to lead to as good an idea as a really tight brief that's really, really clear on what we're trying to do. So I think that pre-work is super important. And I think that's where I would focus on the research and the data and all that sort of stuff up front, not once you've got an idea. I think then I think you just need real conviction and belief that it's the right thing to do.
So how do you distinguish between the good ideas and the bad ones?
Wow. I mean, a lot of it comes down to taste, intuition, trusting the partners you work with. A lot of it is very intangible stuff. There's no checklist of what makes a good idea versus a bad idea. Obviously, it's a bad idea if it's off-brand. So you should have a really good idea of your brand and, that brand voice I talked about earlier. It should be really clear that this feels like our brand or it doesn't. And that's where the biggest problem is. If you're not clear what your brand stands for, then Jesus, how would you know if it's good or bad, or you have no idea? So I think being really clear on your brand is a really important filter for anything that you do. But I don't sit there with a checklist. It's very intangible things, mainly intuition, but also a lot of trust. I think trust is something. If you trust your creative partners, that goes a long way for me. That if a trusted creative partner really believes in it, then I'm likely to really believe in it too.
you talk about these intangibles, but is there a way of training it or
Uh,
training on
yeah.
those or increasing the likelihood that they will get tastes?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and it's something that I probably didn't believe in before I worked at Telstra. So I've got 300 marketers at Telstra. It's a massive team, and how do you get a common creative understanding when you've got 300 marketers, right? So the really important thing is you gotta help everyone understand what great looks like, because I think great is something that is very hard to achieve. There's only one coral reef in the world that we call the Great Barrier Reef, and there's only one wall that we can apparently see from space, although I think that's not true, called the Great Wall of China. Like great, right? There's lots of good walls and lots of good reefs, but there's only one great one. And so I think we throw that word around a lot in corporations. Look at this great experience we've designed. Look at this great ad. Is it great, or is it just kind of good? So getting everyone to understand what great looks like is really important. So we've developed a thing we call it the Telstra Creative Dial. It's a 1 to 10 scoring framework that lets us define every single piece of work we create. So once we create it, we get the whole quarter's output, and we create a lot of stuff. We're a big telco. We create over 100 things every quarter, and we sit down and we score them. We give them a score. And then we give the team the feedback on, like, here's how this piece went. And so what we start to do is we start to train this sort of understanding of what great looks like. We also spend time with teams if they get a bad score. It's not like it's not like a performance review thing. It's okay, let's unpack this. Why did this one not turn out as good as it could have? And it might be the brief. It might be a decision we've made in the creative process. It might be the way we crafted it, whatever it is. And we re-execute it with the team. So they learn, learn from doing. The really important thing, though, with a dial like this is we don't sit there with the dial in front of us when we're seeing creative work, because it engages the rational brain, and it's not we only use it post. We never use it pre.
Oh, interesting. So it's only post-mortem.
Only
it's
post.
Retro.
Yep. And what it's doing, it's creating we talk about it's creating creative confidence in the team, because they start to understand what great looks like. It creates a common language. But the other thing it does, it's a feedback loop, which is providing coaching around how this looks. And the other great thing is, I've got data on our creative output by quarter, by channel, by team, by product, and we can start diagnosing the creative output in a much more in a quantifiable way. Right, but in a way that doesn't strangle the creativity out of it, because we're not trying to do it pre, and we're not trying to use research to give us the score, and it's a much more intuitive tool. But it's been.
And have you seen the creative output improve, like the quality of it improve?
We have, yeah. So we've gone from I think the first quarter we did it. So we did it way back in September 23 was the first time we did it. We've done it. That's our thing. If you're going to do something like this, you've got to do it every quarter without fail. You can't just sort of skip a quarter because annual results were due or something. Like you got to do it every quarter. And we went for 3.8 in September 23, and we got our first quarter over 5. Last quarter we got a 5.2 or something. And that sounds, you're probably going, wow, 5 out of 10, that's not very good. But for us, 10 out of 10 is a titanium at Cannes. 10 out of 10 is like the best work in the world. So to get a 5 is really good, and we're happy with that. And so, but we're very clear on the standard that we're trying to get to. We want to be the most creative brand from this part of the world. That's our sort of purpose, and so we're very clear on what that needs to look like.
That's fantastic. I love how practical you are, how grounded you are in the work. How did you end up becoming a CMO? I mean, you've gone through agencies. It was not the typical path of working up in an organization.
Yeah.
How did that career develop? And was this always an aspiration to do this? And
no, not at all. Not at all. Like many people, I fell into advertising. I don't know a lot of people who, when they're 12 years old, say, I want to be in advertising. Like, you just sort of, I fell into it. I did a marketing degree and fell into it. But I loved it. And I had a great 20-year career in agencies. It took me to New Zealand. It took me to America. It took me to New York. It's unreal. And I loved every minute of it until I didn't. And the reason I didn't was I just honestly, I just couldn't keep handing ideas over to marketers, ideas that I really believed in and I knew were right for their business and what they really needed. And then for whatever, for a multitude of reasons, those ideas would die. And you just get to a point where, well, I certainly got to a point where I was like, well, what if I could be on the other end of that? And what if I could get my hands on those ideas? And what if I could protect those ideas inside the organization and use all the skills I've learned in 20 years of advertising on how to influence and, how to get people to believe in ideas. And like, that's what you learn in agencies. And what if I could do that inside a corporation? I think that could be pretty powerful. And so that led me to leaving New York, coming back to Australia, because a fantastic CMO opportunity opened up in an insurance company. I mean, I'm going to tell you, I wasn't dying to work in insurance, but it was just but it was quite the change from Saatchi & Saatchi in New York to an insurance company in Sydney. But it gave me the opportunity to jump straight into a CMO role, and sort of practice what I preach a bit, like walk the talk and see if I could do it. And what transpired was, look, working in an insurance company or a telco, it's not as much fun as working in an agency. I mean, agencies are fun, but being able to say yes to an idea and having way more control over the destiny of that idea than I ever had in agencies, that is liberating and why I do the job. So yeah, that's kind of how it happened. It wasn't what I set out to do. Like, ironically, my frustration with CMOs made me want to be a CMO.
It's interesting. I mean, it's a classic thing. If you find a problem and then you fall in love with that problem to go solve it, and you did that.
Yeah, totally. And it was always about the work for me. It wasn't about, I'm burnt out from agencies and so I want a different life that you can have from in a corporate. Oh, it wasn't any of that. It was like, no. I'm all about the work, and I believe that I can make more good work happen, great work even, if I'm inside. So, and that's sort of how it's played out.
What's been your biggest observation being on the other side? Now you're on the receiving end of the pitches, but you're also now have a different level of empathy for your clients that you were working with before. Is that what you expected, or is it different?
Oh, it's totally different. But I think the biggest thing I've realized, the aha moment, was all the conversations that really matter about whether an idea is gonna live or die. As an agency person, you're not in. You're just not there. For me, it's so thrilling to actually be in the room when those things are happening. And I just didn't realize when I was in agencies just how far away I was from the real conversations that matter. And now I'm in those conversations, and that's what I love. I think the other thing too, the big thing I had to learn, I had a fantastic boss when I first became a CMO at the insurance company at IAG, Julie Batch. She's awesome. And she said to me, I hadn't been there very long. I'd maybe been there, I don't know, 3 or 4 months. And she pulled me aside after a meeting when I was presenting to the leadership there, and she said, you don't have to sell anymore, right? I said, well, what do you mean? She goes, you don't have to sell. Like, you're not the agency. You're one of us. Like, we're going to believe your opinion. You don't have to stop selling. Just stop selling. And it was a real sort of mode switch from being in agencies where you're trying to sell and persuade, and to actually being confident in the decision we're going to make together. It's just a very different sort of, it's almost like a setting you have to change in how you approach things. And so that was great advice, and really, I completely changed my approach. And the way I do it now is so different how I did in agencies. And I would say that as a piece of advice to agencies, actually, like by selling less, you sell more. Like, when you get all hard sell and you're trying to really close the deal and you're trying to put the pressure, it's not helpful. And it actually, I think, makes marketers less confident in the idea. Like, why are you selling this so hard? Like, what, you know what I mean? Whereas when you just stand behind a great idea with confidence and belief, that's how you sell an idea.
I absolutely love that. And I've loved this whole conversation, because whether we're talking about unleashing potential, getting great ideas out to market, whether it's through marketing, through product, through finance, however way you build, there are some great ideas out there. And the more that we can help make them flourish, can truly transform work. And I also truly believe in the power of the brand, not just to ignite growth, but also to ignite employees and connect employees to drive success. And that's just amazing.
Yeah, it's super powerful. And I often find that the answer to most big problems that the companies I've worked for face is brand. Like when you get the brand right, it sort of solves a lot of the challenges that the company's going through. So yeah, I believe it's the most powerful weapon that any company can have.
And there you go. We've gone full circle. Brent, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It was a truly amazing discussion. I've learned a ton. I'm inspired. I want to go pitch some ideas right now and improve how we can go from good to great.
Thank you, Francois. It's been awesome, man. It's been really fun. I hope this was a great podcast, not just a good one.
Well, we'll see what the listeners say.
We'll find out. But thanks for having me, man. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you all for listening to Next Gen Builders. Look out for our next episode wherever you get your podcasts. And please don't forget to subscribe.